From the ancient world all the way to our modern skylines, there's one shape that has always, and I mean always, captured our imagination: the dome. It's so much more than just a fancy roof, right? It's a symbol of just how far our ambition and our ingenuity can take us. So today, we're going to dig into how two incredible ancient masterpieces totally changed the game and, let us touch the sky. All right, so let's start with a really basic question, but it's a huge one. I want you to picture this. You're an ancient architect. The emperor comes to you and says, build me something massive, bigger than anything anyone has ever seen before. You've got stone, you've got brick, maybe some early concrete. So how in the world are you going to cover this huge open space without the whole thing just caving in on itself? I mean, seriously, that one problem, that's what sparked centuries of incredible innovation.
And that challenge? Well, it gave us two totally game-changing solutions. Two revolutions, really. First up, you've got the Romans in the 2nd century. Their answer was the Pantheon, and it was all about mastering the materials. Then, fast forward about 400 years, and you've got the Byzantines with the Hagia Sophia. Their solution, it was all about mastering geometry. So we're not just looking at two famous buildings here. We're looking at two completely different, brilliant answers to the exact same epic problem.
Okay, let's head to Rome for our first revolution. This is where things get really interesting because builders started acting less like masons and more like chemists. They created a material that was about to change everything. So the Pantheon you can go and see today, it's actually the third one built on that spot. The earlier one burned down, and Emperor Hadrian, who was a real architecture buff, by the way, he was the one who commissioned the rebuild we know and love. Its name means all the gods, which is fitting, but it was way more than just a temple. For Hadrian, this was a statement piece. It was him showing the world that Rome had absolute mastery over the physical world. So what was the big secret? It was all in the concrete.
And get this, the Romans didn't just have one recipe. No, they engineered it in layers like a cake. At the bottom, for the foundation, they used a really heavy, dense mix with basalt rock. But as they built up, they got clever. They started using lighter and lighter stuff, all the way to the very top, where they used super light pumice stone. The real genius here is that the dome actually gets lighter the higher it goes. It's an incredible way to fight against its own weight.
And because of that brilliant material science, they pulled off something just mind-blowing. A perfect dome stretching 43.3 meters across, that's 142 feet, with zero internal columns holding it up. And maybe most incredibly, no steel reinforcement at all, just concrete. Think about that. That record stood for over 1,700 years. It was such a massive leap in technology that nobody topped it until we were well into the industrial age. Now, you get to the very top of this massive concrete dome, and what do you find? A giant hole. Yep, a hole. It's the famous oculus, the eye. And this is just classic Roman genius, because it serves two purposes. Yeah, it's a beautiful, dramatic skylight that connects the inside to the heavens. But it's also a brilliant engineering trick. By just not building that top part, they removed tons and tons of weight right at the dome's weakest spot. It's such a clever way to relieve stress on the whole structure. It's amazing the Pantheon is still standing. It survived invasions, earthquakes, even the fall of Rome, mostly because it was turned into a church back in 609. But not everyone treated it with respect. In the 1600s, there was this pope, Urban VIII, from the Barberini family, and he stripped all this beautiful bronze from the ceiling to melt it down and make cannons. As you can imagine, the people of Rome were furious. They came up with a saying that people still use today: what the barbarians didn't do, the Barberini did. Ouch. All right, so that was revolution number one. Now, let's jump forward 400 years and head east to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The revolution here wasn't about a new material. Oh no. This one was all about using pure geometry to make a massive dome look like it was literally floating in midair. The story behind Hagia Sophia is pure drama. See, for Emperor Justinian, this was a massive political move. In 532, these huge riots, the Nika riots, tore through the city, destroyed the main church, and almost cost him his throne. So what does he do? Just 39 days after putting down the revolt, he starts building. And not just any building. Hagia Sophia was his definitive answer, a symbol of power and rebirth, designed to leave everyone completely speechless. The first dome actually collapsed in an earthquake a few years later, but they just rebuilt it, this time even taller. And that's the icon we have today. So how did they do it? How did they make it float? The answer, the secret weapon, was an incredible geometric invention called the pendentive. Okay, so think about the basic problem. You're trying to put a round dome on top of a square room. It's literally the round peg in a square hole problem. Well, pendentives are the solution. They're these amazing curved triangular sections that perfectly bridge the gap. They catch the circle of the dome and funnel all of that crushing weight and force down into 4 giant pillars, one in each corner of the square.
And this is where the technology has this just breathtaking effect. Because the pendentives were doing all the heavy lifting, the walls didn't have to be solid anymore. This freed up the architects to do something radical. They put a ring of 40 windows right at the base of the dome. So when the sun shines in, the light floods the space and completely hides the supports. It creates this unbelievable, magical illusion that the dome isn't being held up at all, that it's just floating there, suspended from heaven.
So let's just boil it down. We're looking at 2 brilliant solutions to the exact same physics problem. The Pantheon's approach is kind of like brute force. It's this massive, heavy, solid structure. The dome sits on a super thick round wall that just absorbs all that weight and outward pressure through sheer size. But Hagia Sophia, that's more like structural elegance. It's like a skeleton. It doesn't just absorb the force, it directs it. It cleverly channels all the weight down through those pendentives and into just 4 specific points. That's what opened up the whole space and created that feeling of lightness.
Okay, so these buildings were obviously incredible feats of engineering, but they were so much more than that. They were catalysts. The innovations from the Pantheon and Hagia Sophia spread out across the world and completely changed how we build, how we worship, and even how we gather as people. And that impact was just huge. Suddenly, you could create these vast, awe-inspiring religious spaces that totally transformed the experience of worship. Domes started to define city skylines, becoming these powerful symbols of a city's or an empire's strength. And of course, just trying to build them pushed technology forward in incredible ways. And as these ideas traveled, different cultures picked them up, put their own spin on them, and a fantastic exchange of ideas began.
But I think, when you get right down to it, the real power of the dome is what it symbolizes. For centuries, across so many cultures, that soaring curved shape was seen as a mirror of the heavens. When you walked into a building like the Pantheon or Hagia Sophia, you weren't just entering a building. You were stepping into a small-scale model of the entire universe. It was a sacred place that connected our world, the Earth, with the divine, a physical reminder of our place in the cosmos.
So that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. Today, we've got steel, we have carbon fiber, we have computers that can design anything. So what can these ancient builders, with their stone and their geometry, really teach us? Well, maybe it's that the biggest breakthroughs don't always come from a fancy new material. Maybe they come from a deep, fundamental understanding of the forces of nature, a bold imagination, and that timeless human need to create something that lasts, something that reaches for the sky.